And welcome, everybody. Hands-on Apologetics. You have entered into Virgin Most Powerful Apologetics Dojo. We're chatting with Dr. Brian Bradford. By the way, received his PhD from Western Michigan University in early Islamic studies. He's written several books. You should check it out, like Arabian Religion Before Muhammad and Surah 135 in chronological order. And also Muhammad's Jesus, Quran Parallels with Non-Biblical Text. And, yeah, so Dr. Bradford, so purportedly Muhammad was given these revelations from God, and was it did he immediately write them down? Kind of take us through the transmission of this.
Well, the transmission, one thing you have to remember, Gary, about all this is that all the Islamic sources come at least 200 to 300 years after Muhammad died. So we have to ask, okay, how accurate are all of these? But the basic Islamic interpretation is, after Muhammad received this first revelation in the cave from Angel Gabriel, he was terrified. He thought he was possessed, and he wanted to jump off a cliff and kill himself. But Gabriel said, no, you're Muhammad, you're God's apostle, and I'm Gabriel, so just keep listening to this, and then, we'll see what happens. Basically, he dies in the year 632, and at that time, the revelations pretty much automatically come to an end because he's not going to be getting any more. And the problem was in society at that time that when he died, the nomadic tribes who had converted to Islam suddenly abandoned Islam. And according to the tribal traditions, Muhammad's death nullified the economic tribute they were to pay to him. So the first caliph, Abu Bakr, has to conduct the first case of jihad against these tribes to bring them back into the fold. And the fear was a lot of these revelations would be lost because there was a lot of, I think several hundred people died in a particular battle in the year 634. And the fear was, since Muhammad relied on the oral transmission of these, if these were forgotten by his followers, that they would be forgotten entirely forever. So they decided we have to get a collection. We have to get all these revelations that Muhammad had from the year 610 up till about the year 632 and get them for society so we have proper religious belief and religious conduct. And that's what kind of triggered the whole idea that they had to collect everything.
Okay. Yeah, so the collection of, these sayings of Muhammad, was all of them put down in writing that eventually became the Quran, or is it? What's the relation with the hadiths, the oral tradition? Because it sounds like it's almost like the same thing. They're all coming from oral tradition.
Right. That's what Islamic, or I guess you could even say pre-Islamic Arabian society in general was based on oral traditions. Yeah. And the hadith, for example, are anecdotal sayings attributed to Muhammad that don't come along until the 9th and 10th century. And there was over 600,000 of those collected, but only about 7,200 were kept and considered authentic. The other ones were thrown out because they were considered spurious and not really accurate. Okay. There's a very important individual. His name is Zayd ibn Thabit, who was considered the first poetic defender, which is a strange term because poets and reciting poetry is kind of condemned in the Quran itself. But he was considered Muhammad's poetic defender, meaning that he would counteract any attacks on Muhammad in society with verses from the Quran or any type of poetic inventions that would guard Muhammad against a lot of these critical attacks people are saying. For example, the Quran says that Muhammad was just repeating old stories. These are just stories from the ancients. We've heard these before. This is nothing new. But then strategically, Zayd ibn Thabit, who was also assisted by Gabriel, according to the hadith, to attack people and abuse them with his poetry to excel Muhammad in society and kind of degrade anybody else who was saying negative things about his revelations. Apparently, when he ran around, Ibn Thabit, when he was commissioned to collect all these verses, they were written down on palm leaves, pieces of bone, pieces of pottery, and even upon going into Muhammad's actual personal residence, he found everything scattered about and not really any type of chronological order or arrangement. And there's actually one hadith that says it would be easier for me to move a mountain than it would be to collect these, because Allah's apostle, meaning Muhammad, did not even leave a collection. So even in the hadith, Gary, we have cases where you don't have a completely bound chapter 1 through chapter 114 in exact order Quran. That does not exist, arguably up until even the 10th century. Some people even say that even that late, the Quran wasn't even really put together yet. So there's still a lot of debate, even when you look at the Islamic sources themselves.
Oh, wow. Yeah, so so there's a large body of writings and material that ultimately needs to kind of be put into order, I suppose, and made into an authoritative collection.
Right, because one of the problems with early Islam was you had several different main cities. You had cities in Iraq, cities in the Arabian Peninsula, who had people reciting the Quran in different dialects. And this led to, I guess, some say major, some say minor cases of vocabulary that would affect theology, that would affect prayer and ritual. And then eventually you have the Caliph Uthman about the year 650, who says, okay, we can't do this anymore. We have to have one codified collection. They have to all match and be in the same dialect. So anything that varied from what he wanted was gathered up and burned and destroyed. So there would be only one Quran and one dialect. But that was even another problem, because in the script that was used, called Kufic, it's kind of like block letters of Arabic. There's no vowel markings. So you can have one word can have potentially up to 30 different meanings depending on where you put the vowel markings.
Right.
And that's one of the problems that's been encountered in some of the manuscripts they have found in modern-day Yemen, some of the collections they have in Turkey, some of the oldest manuscripts they even found in Birmingham in the UK in a library that everybody was excited about, because they actually dated to, strangely enough, before Muhammad and before the Caliph Uthman had this organized and put together in the year 652. So there's still a lot of textual criticism and discrepancies that are still being found as early as, or as recently, I should say, as 2017 and 2018 when it comes to deciding if the Quran is an actual document today that is perfectly matched to the older texts. And the science says it's not even close, actually.
Wow. So you're talking about is the canonical text that Islam possesses today, is it identical to Uthman's collection? And the answer is no.
Well,
did I understand that correctly?
They all date to, the manuscripts we have today all date to at least the 750s or even later. There's nothing that dates to the Uthman period about the year 650 or so. So that's a problem when they try to argue that the way it was revealed to Muhammad and he recited it is perfect and unaltered from then until today. And that's not the case.
Very interesting. My question is, Caliph Uthman, what competency did he have to declare we're going to have one Quran and this is the standard? And, do Muslims think of him as being in some sense inspired to do this?
It's conceived more of a political, temporal type of organization. When we talk about the Bible, for example, the inspired writers of the New Testament and that sort of thing, they don't really have that type of same concept that we do. It was more political, used for religious and political control, to have one collection that was in one dialect so everybody could believe the same thing. And Uthman has, different scholars say different things about him. Some say he was important